Hey guys, it's Ihasnotomato Draws here, and today I'm bringing you a special little speed drawing. A bit different to what I normally do, which I suppose is odd because I've technically only done one speed drawing on this channel, but yeah, you know. Where today I'm not going to be drawing any pre-existing character or property or IP as I typically do, but instead I'm going to be drawing my own original characters, my OCs, Do Not Steals. Which are from my webcomic, Cast a Psychopath, for those of you who know what that is. Link in the description if you're interested in reading that. These are two characters that I actually haven't revealed yet, but will pretty much be revealed side by side with this video. And I thought, you know, it might be really interesting to record myself drawing them first off, their first designs, and also commentate over them and explain like my thought process about you know, creating the characters and like what goes through my mind and what am I thinking of, like why, like giving explanations to why do they look like this, and like giving an idea of just the thought process of character design, and with the intention of both kind of documenting it for myself, and I do plan hopefully of doing all the characters in Cast, including the ones I've already released obviously, and also perhaps, you know, somewhat of a, I guess, teaching or guiding tool for people who are interested in character design, or at the very least, you know, interested on how I do it. So yeah, so anyway, getting right into it, this is Detective Sylvester, this first character I'm drawing here. And right off the bat, just his character is someone who's very, very confident, someone who's very, I wouldn't say egotistical, but just someone who knows that they are the smartest man in the room, so to speak. You know, I would consider someone egotistical as someone who's trying to prove themselves to others, as if that they know that they're better than them. They think that they're better than other people, and then they try and prove how much better they are. I would say Sylvester is more of a character who knows he's better than everyone and doesn't need to prove it, so to speak. You know, that's the kind of character I'm trying to go for. So right off the bat, that speaks right into his stance, which is that he's got a sort of above stance, looking down at the camera, as if he's just, you know, I'm looking down on you. Continuing on in his stance, another thing that he's doing is that he's buttoning up his shirt. So this says a lot of stuff right off the bat, which is one, you know, he cares. Sorry, he cares a bit about his appearance, you know, and that he's, you know, trying to make himself look kind of nice, at least, you know. But it also kind of shows that by him, like, kind of adjusting it and looking down on you, that he's sort of giving off this impression of me adjusting my my clothes is more important than really paying attention to whatever you're doing, so to speak. In a kind of like, like, you mean so little to me that I can, you know, do something else while I'm listening to you. That kind of idea. Continuing on from that, then looking at his, let's look at his face next, I suppose. Once again, his face is very refined, very simplistic, but, you know, you can tell a few things. Number one is that he's got his hair all slicked back and nice. You know, again, kind of taking care of his appearance. Later on, I'll color him in, and you see that he's got white, glossy hair and all things going on like that. But his eyes also have a sort of arc down to them, that he's always sort of got that, I don't know, that sinister stare almost of, like, you know, I've just somewhat of a, I don't know how to describe it, just this sort of like, I'm always thinking, I always know what's going on, and I'm always ahead of the situation kind of stare. That's sort of what I was going for there. Additionally, as I was talking about his sleeves earlier and how he's got them pinned up in terms of him knowing what's going on and stuff like that. That's also a deliberate choice to make him have long sleeves, because it implies that he's got something to hide in a way. Now, I'm not necessarily saying he does or doesn't, but this idea that he not only does he know more than you, this idea that, you know, he's the smartest man in the room, but he's also got his own secrets that he might be hiding from you, that, you know, he doesn't have much to go on. That's a typical thing in character design. You know, the old saying, you know, got a trick up your sleeve or whatever like that. That carries on into character design, which is, you know, if they have exposed arms, typically that shows that they're more innocent and don't have much to hide or anything like that. And the same goes vice versa for someone who does have their arms covered. You know, it's a very subtle thing and not something that you're particularly even supposed to think of, you know, all that much. But it is something that is present and something that goes into the ideas of the character design and stuff like that. And that's kind of why I wanted to make this video, to explain this kind of stuff and, you know, somewhat, you know, explain even the most minor of details going into him. So the other thing is, of course, he is a detective. So there's a couple of little signs that I wanted to show that he was doing. He's more than just a businessman wearing a nice, you know, kind of suit combo going on. But he's also got a gun, which is holstered, which is another important detail. If you ever want to, I think a gun, having a gun on a character is a big thing on its own. Where if you have a gun on a character and they're holding it, that implies that that gun is going to be used frequently, that they're going to be shooting people a lot, that there's going to be a lot of action perhaps, that there's going to be a lot going on with that gun. But by having the gun holstered, it tells you that they're a person in a position of power enough to be able to have a visible firearm holstered. But additionally, the fact that it is holstered means that it's probably not going to be as action-packed and things like that. This is a detective story. It's not necessarily a, you know, let's go and guns a-blazing kind of story. The other thing you might have noticed me drawing there was the badge. I drew a very specific badge. That is because it is the police symbol for South Australia, which is where I live. And the reason I did that is because Cass the Psychopath is indeed set in Australia. It's not necessarily set in South Australia, but I thought for the purpose of these drawings, you know, might as well make it close to home, familiar. Where it's set in Australia, I don't know. I'm still making that up. But yeah, that's just a funny little detail there, if you're curious at all. Now we're getting into coloring and stuff like that. And color is a big thing when it comes to character design, where typically characters in just about anything are color coordinated, and if they're not color coordinated, then their shapes are important. Say look at TF2, where everyone has to wear similar colors, so that's why their silhouettes are so unique. They're able to so you can see who's who really quickly, you know what I mean? But when it comes to colors, it really helps to have a very restrictive color palette, I suppose. When designing characters, typically, you know, if you're going for, okay, this character, like for instance Cass, she's primarily red, so all of her colors typically revolve around the color red, orange, you know, that kind of stuff. And that's the kind of philosophy that I take, but I try and take it to a bit more extreme sometimes. Like I said, I like to mainly focus around color. One color. Some other characters and stuff like that you might see like have multiple colors associated with them, but usually it's only 1, 2, or 3 to avoid too much confusing, because once you have too many colors going on, it gets cluttered and confusing and you don't quite know. Sylvester here, his color is actually supposed to be white and light gray, which is, I guess, a bit confusing right off the bat. And the reason for that is that because of my particular method of wanting to draw characters with just one color associated with them, what I've done is I've taken the 3 primary colors and the 3 secondary colors, which are the 6 main colors, for my main cast of characters. So each one of my main cast characters is associated with one of those colors, and the 2 detectives, which are somewhat outside of the story, they're having their own story on their own, sort of outside the story, which will eventually intertwine, obviously. Their colors are black and white, you know, because that's outside of the color wheel, and that's just like another level that it works on. So Sylvester here, his colors mainly focused around white, so he's very kind of pristine and very, you know, up there, and he's all, you know, very fancy, very sort of going for a you know, a Lucius Malfoy kind of look, I guess you could say, that kind of vibe. Yeah. Anyway, let's now move on to Detective Mcmanus. Alright, so Mcmanus is a little bit different to Sylvester in that, well, I was trying to go for somewhat of a opposite, I guess, approach. Immediately off the bat, I started drawing him in one direction and decided, no, he's got to be pictured with Sylvester, so Sylvester's already facing to the right, so I'm going to make Mcmanus facing to the left. So it's just already this idea that they're somewhat opposites to each other in a way. So Mcmanus is different in that he's still a really good detective and he still knows what he's doing and stuff like that, but he's slightly more unsure of himself, you know. He's more cautious, I guess you could say. He's also I'm going for a bit more of a grizzled veteran look. I mean, maybe not a veteran, but just someone who's definitely been a detective for a long time, you know, for like 20 years or something like that. Additionally, he is also, the idea is that I'm going for is that he's also a father of two, you know, so he's got that kind of like, I'm a father, I'm trying to look out for my kids, but I'm trying to, I've also got to like enforce the law. I got to do my job, which might be dangerous, but you know. So it's one of those things where, like, you know, obviously his kids are his driving force, and that's who he's looking out for. It's a bit generic, but you know, it's a tried and true method, and there is more to this character of which that, you know, I haven't necessarily discussed. One thing that I'm doing here right off the bat is that I'm actually drawing him. Not necessarily reaching for his gun, but, you know, showing it, allowing him to kind of be ready just in case something goes haywire. Like I said, you could consider him more of a cautious, more of a, like, someone who's prepared for a scenario, rather as opposed to Sylvester, who just expects scenarios to happen, if that makes any sense at all. Another thing is that obviously I didn't really mention this necessarily with Sylvester, but Mcmanus wears his clothing a lot more loose, a lot more, you know, just kind of rugged, more of a, I put this, you know, coat on every day for the last 20 years or whatever, you know, it's like, I don't really care how I look. While Sylvester, on the other hand, he's very pristine and wants himself to look nice every day. And he's got a kind of look that he's going for, etc. So on top of being like on top of differences compared to Sylvester, Mcmanus, you know, his stance isn't as refined as his. Sylvester stood up straight and looking down, while Mcmanus is actually kind of hunched over, and it's not necessarily that he's deliberately hunched over as much as he's, you know, he's got back problems or whatever. He's somewhat of an old man, so, you know, I'm drawing on some like mild wrinkles. He's not super old or anything like that. But yeah, again, I've given him that kind of like knowing look, or like that sort of I'm suspicious of you kind of look, or like trying to think a few steps ahead, I guess you could say. If you're wondering about that specific style, about his hair and his eyes and stuff like that, there is a method behind it. It is because that it's somewhat of a family trait. I don't necessarily want to reveal who his family is in this video, but that's sort of a driving force behind it as well. As you might imagine, when you're drawing family members, you might want to have them have similar traits to each other. But yeah, here you can see I've drawn his tie. It's a little bit looser. It's still, you know, made up. He's still a responsible adult, but he's, you know, a little bit loose in how he kind of dresses himself there. You know, it's all like a bit crinkled and stuff like that. I did more crinkle lines, and he's actually wearing his jacket there to be more covered up, I guess you could say. And he also kind of gives across a vibe of, you know, I might have something up my sleeve. I might know more than you suspect I do. And I guess what I'm trying to go for there is that Sylvester, he's the kind of character that he looks like he knows more than he's giving on. And that's kind of obvious in his design in a way. Like, you know, you kind of suspect that maybe he's got more going on in his life, while Mcmanus, he's better at hiding it, but he's that kind of character that, you know, might kind of come out at the end and be like, actually, I knew it all along, or something like that. Is that a spoiler? I don't know. You'll have to find out. Haha. No. But yeah, also I have drawn them with the same like kind of shoes and stuff like that. I thought it'd be good to kind of give that sort of formality, and that, of course, by them sharing the same kind of clothes and stuff like that, it gives the impression that, of course, they are partners and that they are both working in the same, you know, the detective agency. They're partners together, and that they're looking into the case For those of you wondering, by the way, these are the detectives looking into the case of Cass, the psychopath who is killing lots of people. Again, I'm drawing the South Australian badge there, which I'm trying to get it looking perfect. I don't even know why I go into this much detail sometimes, but I just gotta. It's actually a surprisingly fun thing to draw with a magpie on it there. I don't know if I'm ever gonna if it's gonna be set in South Australia. To be honest, it doesn't really matter. The only thing that even remotely matters is that it is indeed set in Australia in general. And the reason it's set in Australia is because it is, of course, my home. If you don't know, it is where I live. It is where I was born, and I want more stories based on it. Anyway, so now we're getting into color, and as you can see here, immediately I've gone into blacks and darker grays. The pants and the shoes are actually still the same color of Sylvester's. But, you know, then as you go further up, the differences change there. So he's got a dark grey shirt, things like that. His skin tone is a little bit different. Again, that's more related to his family members. Sorry, I almost lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, and one of my personal things I like to do as well, I also like to make their eye color as well, their sort of associated color. So he even has dark grey eyes, and Sylvester, I didn't mention, was that he had light grey eyes, so, you know, parallels there. And, of course, little bits of grey going on, got a little bit of a grey gradient in his hair, just to kind of show that he's getting older, but he's still not old enough to, you know, be considered an old man or retire necessarily. But you know what I'm kind of going for? He's in that sort of, I wouldn't call it middle age. I think he's a bit past that. Maybe he's in his like 40s, 50s, I guess. Yeah. I'm also using slightly darker tones here for the shading, ever so slightly. I wouldn't be surprised if no one really noticed. But yeah, I do have like a sort of methodology, I suppose, I guess, to my shading and stuff like that. It's not just I did used to just do a pure just like I did like a black over it and then made it lighter. That doesn't look that super great, so now I'm actually experimenting with colors and stuff like that, trying to make it look interesting. Filling with his glasses and things like that. His glasses as well is sort of like a, you know, knowing old man sort of thing. Glasses, I mean, it's a stereotype, but it typically is associated with someone who is smarter. And, you know, whether or not that is a stereotype or not, it is just the way that people associate people like that. You know, it's always like, oh, you know, 4 eyes and Poindexter or whatever. But it's just a way of kind of showing, okay, this person's, you know, they've got something on. You know, they might. It just adds to this knowing look, I guess you could say. Giving them a bit of a sheen as well, and figuring out how I wanted to do the highlights there. I should also mention as well, these aren't necessarily the final designs. I'm pretty happy with them. I wouldn't mind fiddling with them a bit. So in the end, they might not look exactly like they do here, but this is more just for like demonstration purposes. And again, because these are my first kind of my first proper drawings of them. I've got lots of doodles of them in my sketchbook and stuff, but these are my proper, like, I'm gonna release these. This is my speed drawing for them, and you know, this is what they're generally going to look like, I guess. But there are things here and there that I might want to tweak to perhaps highlight the differences between them a bit more, the parallels, you know. Of course, a lot of what goes into character design in that is not just the stance and things like that and the way they look, but also the way that they speak and go about things. But the idea is when you look at the characters, you should be able to know right off the bat, like, what kind of character they are. And I think that's a really big point when making characters in character design. You should, in my opinion, be able to look at a character and just immediately get at least an impression of the kind of character they are. Right? That's what you're kind of aiming for. You want to be able to just show someone that knows nothing about the character and just be like, what do you think this character is like? And that kind of shows through as well, because before I properly released Cass, I released some earlier drawings, which I'll show on screen now, of some characters, and for the most part, like, people were able to look at them and guess like what kind of person they were like and get it right on the dot. But there is at least one character, Clementine, who I didn't draw standing the right way. I didn't get the stance right, and as a result, people didn't quite get what I was trying to go with her. And, you know, I kind of want to redraw that drawing and kind of show, actually, her personality isn't quite like that. It's more like this. You know, I want to change her stance and all that kind of idea. So that's, if you're interested in character design and stuff like that, that's a big thing that I recommend doing, which is, you know, try and design your characters in that you can look at them and get a general impression of what they're like. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video semi-informative. I have been Ihasnotomato Draws, as always. The next video probably won't be as boring, but I really enjoy this kind of stuff, and hopefully you guys do as well. And I do plan on doing maybe a video for every one of my characters from Cass, and maybe even other stuff. I will see you guys next time. Bye.